not true. And I think all of us are getting from a big segment of Polish population incredible support during, and part of them, including people in the government. It's not only, a question, a partisan question. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Follow up, thank you. Yes, go for it. Okay. Very important also is that there seems to be something that Poland says this. There's a part of Poland that says that. I think the original motivation was wanting to defend the great name of Poland, which is a greater part of rising nationalism, less to do with anti-Semitism, more to do with rising nationalism. And the other context, not to be quoted in my name, is that over the last 2 years of the 2.5 years of this new government is undermining of rule of law. That whenever they feel like passing, they just get up one day and they pass a law. And then afterwards, they have to try to figure out what to do with it because they have a majority in the parliament. It has nothing to do with Jews. It impacts badly on Jews. Also, very important is the fact that some of the Jewish responses have also been irresponsible. To say that, all Poles are anti-Semites is not true, as Ambassador just said. And it's not only not true, because not true happens a lot, it's hurtful. And that creates then greater hurt on the other side. Again, going back to my first idea, feeling the pain of the other side. The infamous statement that Poles drink anti-Semitism with their mother's milk, my response to that is, again, not to be quoted, is anti-Semitism is down because they're bottle feeding.
We're going to quote you on like everything that you say here.
Yeah, I figured that's why. Whenever I make sure I get quoted, I say, "Don't quote me," and then I know I'll get quoted. Works really well with journalists. And the last thing is even in today's, or was yesterday's, Jerusalem Post, which is perhaps not okay. I can't get the thing to work, but says Israeli-Polish presidents failed to resolve Polish Holocaust law crisis. Well, first of all, the two presidents were going on March of the Living. They weren't holding diplomatic negotiations. Number two, we all know that neither the Polish president nor the Israeli president has the authority in their position as president to negotiate. Part of the problem is exacerbated by irresponsible media. And I don't want to start saying fake news, but it's exceedingly frustrating. Ambassador was actually in the private meetings. I wasn't. I was standing outside, which meant I got to hear from both sides afterwards what was said. And both sides, what I heard, felt very positive about the discussions without details. The body language between the two presidents was very warm. And I'm flabbergasted at Times of Israel, Jerusalem. It's as if they wrote the articles on Wednesday because they knew what was going to happen. And that's just a general warning, not only in the FSU, but also in the West. Be careful of the media that you read.
Can I add something? Because the rabbi is much more diplomatic than I am. around this crisis on all sides, including and very much including the Jewish Israeli side, every idiot had something to add to this fire. So that's my non-diplomatic version of the same thing.
Someone said yesterday about me.
Agnieszka, would you like to add something to this?
Go. I'm quiet.
Please say.
Someone said yesterday that I've become a wonderful fireman.
I wanted to relate to what you said, that it's a part of a larger process of linked to nationalism, and I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on this. Yes, I think that the true intention of the law was not anti-Semitic. I believe that. The law, it's as explained by the decision makers, was supposed to fight with most of all with the term Polish death camps, Polish concentration camps, which according to the government is occurring more and more often, mostly outside of Poland. I must say that
And mostly in their imagination.
I just was about to say that I beg to differ. I mean, first of all, the term, yes, it is being used, but it's being used less and less. And many people have done a lot to fight with this term, including Polish diplomats, but also organizations like AGC. We have been working with, for instance, American media to educate them why is this term unfair and hurtful for Polish people. Also, personally, I think that this term is being used more geographically than anything else. But there is, again, getting back to the subject of this feeling of victimhood and competition of suffering, there is a feeling in Poland, among actually surprisingly many people, that Poland is blamed for Holocaust, and that by saying Polish death camps, the responsibility for Holocaust and for creating death camps is attributed to the Poles, which is untrue. But the law, surprisingly or interestingly, does not refer at all to the word Polish death camps. It talks about attributing to the Polish nation, I mean, and what is Polish nation? I would love to hear this description for our.
We have a paragraph, something, we read 7 pages of what's Polish nation, but I can't.
But still, yeah. But I'm still not sure what it means in this case. Attributing war crimes against the facts. So I don't want to get into the details of the legislation, but the legislation, in its essence, in our opinion, is wrong, because first of all, it is not through legislation that you deal with such matters. It's through education and dialogue. Number two, the legislation is very unclear and very unprecise. And number three, what we only learned afterwards, it triggered, as Ambassador Azari said, really anti-Semitism that I have not seen in Poland since I am dealing with this issue. It's mostly visible in the media, in the internet, but also I think Poland has come after 1989 to a certain point where anti-Semitism in the public sphere was unaccepted and unacceptable, and that we see has changed. We see and hear shocking statements from even some politicians. They appear on public media. And while, yes, we must admit that Polish politicians, including Polish president or prime minister, they denounce anti-Semitism. They say that there is no room for anti-Semitism in Poland. My feeling is that it's always done on a very general level. It does not deal with particular situations, and that still concrete steps and measures needs to be taken. And about the legislation and the larger scope of it, my fear is, and I think we can already observe results of it, is that it oversimplifies the image in the attempt of fighting with misconceptions and stereotypes about Poland outside of Poland, which they exist. I spent some time working also with Jewish communities outside of Poland, and I think there is room for improvement in education about history of Poland and history of Second World War. Yet it strengthens this false view that many Poles have, that Poles were only the victims, and if they did anything was to help the Jews. And we know that it's not true. We know it from our personal stories. We know it from our family stories. And by the way, we also know it from Polish research, because there are great, as you mentioned, Polish researchers, and we learn more and more about the attitudes of Poles during the Holocaust. And we simply know that it's not true, that Poles only helped the Jews or did nothing, as most of them actually could not do nothing. They were in some ways and in some cases contributing to the death of Jews. So the effect of this law, in my opinion, is to some extent intimidate the researchers who present the truth that is difficult to accept, and to make Polish people feel better about themselves, which is something that we all like. We like to feel good about ourselves.
Thank you. Ambassador, yesterday you told Israel Radio that the law shouldn't be completely abolished, but rather the language of it should be changed. And I think the reason you gave for this was so in order not to raise new debates that might be additionally troubling. Now, my question is that given the anti-Semitism that we've experienced now, and given the climate that we're experiencing now, is this too soft of a stance, or should we confront this kind of phenomenon head on?
I don't think it's a soft stance. The tribunal has three options. One option, I'm explaining my opinion. It doesn't influence the tribunal, obviously. One option is saying the law is wonderful, we are not changing anything. Very bad. Agreed. The second option is the law is horrible. It's hereby cancelled, which, in my opinion, will lead to a new legislation and to prolonging of this. I don't know even how to describe, but this painful issue politically more and more and more and more. Why do I think that that's what will happen if they completely cancel the law? Because doing something about Polish pride, not about the Holocaust, about Polish pride was one, or Polish death camps or whatever. For the ones living in Russia, some of the wordings here in Poland are quite similar, because the ruling party was talking and is talking about raising from your knees and so on. You know, all this choice of words and so on. So it's a party promised that they will do something about it. So I'm pretty positive that they will if the law is cancelled. And the third option is to give shortly, if I need to tell it very shortly, it's to explain it away, to make it completely impossible to use in all cases which worry us. And I think it's the best solution. I don't think it's the softest solution. In the last 2.5 months, I was accused of anything but of being soft. But
It's good to hear from the other side.
Rabbi Shudrock, were you going to? Please.
No, it's okay. Next question.
As we know, Jews from all over the world are weighing in on the subject, some of them from the media, some not from the media. But the question is, is this any of their business? Matthew, how does this affect Jews around the world?
It's a big question. How does it affect Jews around the world? I think that it affects us psychologically more than it affects us in any other way, of course, right? So if we get the sense that the Poles are trying to, the Polish government is trying to rewrite history and absolve any guilt whatsoever, I think one of the things that the HAC has tried to do over many years is give nations the room to explore its own history and come to terms with its own history. And I don't want to use the word apologize, but to understand the facts, learn from those facts. And I think that has made Jews around the world feel more comfortable when people acknowledge what actually happened, when they take responsibility for both the things they did against the Nazis, what they did in collaboration with the Nazis, whatever it was. I think that sort of an honest reflection of what happened makes Jews feel less threatened. And I think that this law is trying to rewrite a little bit of history. And again, maybe not with the intention, which we've heard from the other panelists, maybe not with the intention of being anti-Semitic, but it certainly has had that effect on the psychology of Jews around the world. And if Poland could sort of erase its own history, then perhaps others could as well. And that is, I think, very scary to Jews.
Again, thank you very much, Matthew. I think it's very important that Jews from around the world weigh in, but in a responsible way and in coordination with the local Jewish community. Because this way it's just a better strategy that we coordinate. Number two, for example, on the topic of apology, which was not 100% success, the Polish president in March of 1968 was the last time there was a official government anti-Semitic campaign, and something like there's still a big discussion. 15 to 20,000 Jews actually left in 68, 69. The Polish president stood there in front of the University of Warsaw, where the demonstrations began 50 years ago, and said, "I apologize." It was not a 100% apology. I'd give him about a 90% apology, but that's still pretty amazing. The problem is that nobody heard about it. And that's also part of the problem, is that it pays always to coordinate with whatever situation with the local community, because they may know things that simply didn't make it into the international press, is not on the international radar, and therefore when Jews from around the world respond, they can respond in a better informed and in a more effective fashion. But in the end, and I just want to go back to one other point, the real problem now is not the law. It's letting the anti-Semitic genie out of the bottle, and that genie does not like to go back in the bottle. How do you reverse it? I don't know, but we're still working on it. And that's why while I was disappointed that President Duda simply didn't say yesterday what he said on other occasions, they were also Polish collaborators, that one sentence, which off the record, I begged his people that he should say, but they're afraid.
He did at the press conference after the...
Kind of.
Kind of.
But he made in both places very strong condemnations of anti-Semitism, which at some level is equally, I don't want to say more important, is very important, because that should put a damper on this new wave of anti-Semitic statements. The president also visited our Krakow JCC last month with the only intention of showing anti-Semites that this is a place the president also visits. And on April 19th, next week, the 75th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, after the main ceremony at the Rappaport Monument, who I assume you've all been to, correct? Yes. He's coming to the Noshik Synagogue, again, with his people saying, we want to show the anti-Semites in Poland that the president also goes to a synagogue. Considering that this is a right-of-center party, still including elements that are far-right, it's, I would say, bordering on brave. I just wish you would have been a little better yesterday, but.
Just one thing, I'm very surprised that the rabbi, with all his experience, still thinks that Jews can coordinate anything among themselves.
The only one who can do it is Chaim.
Chaim can, but it's only still a part of the Jewish world, not everybody. Again, talking about what's going on outside. Those of you who saw this little film on the internet and on the media about Polish Holocaust, you have to understand that I'm talking about the film which said, we accuse you, there was Polish Holocaust and so on. This is as bad as any anti-Semitic propaganda against Jews. As bad. There is such a thing as anti-Polonism, and this is racist, simply racist. And we have to take care very much of not becoming reverse anti-Semites ourselves.
30 more seconds. Thank you very much that I'm still naive. I take that as a badge of pride. And I like to say is that if what I say, people say, do you really believe that? And I say, well, if it's not a fact, then it's a prayer. About Jews coordinating. What did I say now? Oh, come on, I lost it. Also in terms of, because, your young leadership, Global Summit. Another important thing that I discovered, and I didn't mean to do this, but then I saw that there was pretty good to do it that way, was that I criticized the law. I certainly was very much against all these anti-Semitic statements. But then I also would always, in the Polish media and the foreign media, condemn anti-Polonism, because it's also wrong. Now, anti-Semitism is different. Anti-Semitism in history has led to pogroms and the Holocaust. Anti-Polonism is absolutely wrong and has led to Poles having bad feelings. So I'm not going to compare the results of the two, but they're both wrong and they both should not be tolerated. And as long as I spoke out against anti-Polonism, I had people from different politicians calling me up and saying thank you when I said the law is bad, there's anti-Semitism in Poland, but there's also anti-Polonism. That's what they wanted to hear. So again, when you deal, and I'm talking not just about this problem, but to learn in situations that you'll face in 3 months and in 13 years, then when you face a difficult situation, the way to be able to criticize is by also criticizing what the other side is upset with, if it's legitimate.
Agnieszka, would you like to add anything?
Well, I can only echo what you said. That actually I think that especially on this matter, the voice of the Jewish community of outside of Poland is very important. Of course, coordinated, if it's to the extent that it's possible, as we heard, and I started in the beginning. I started that generally the presence and the significance and the acknowledgement of the Jewish community in Poland is crucial in many aspects. But working for the organization that I do, American Jewish Committee, I think that the voice from outside on this matter was crucial, and the reaction of Israel, of course, but also from the United States. And I think that Holocaust and Poland, to a certain extent, understands this, but perhaps should understand this even more. The memory of Holocaust belongs to everybody, and Jewish community is first. So Poland cannot introduce legislation that will influence foreign citizens. That's also important to remember, but that somehow influences the discourse about Holocaust and expect this to remain an internal affair. At the same time, it shows the sort of tragedy of Poland, that the fact that Holocaust happened in Poland, not by its initiative, not by its choice, not by its will always mean that Poland will be doomed with the subject, will be the custodian of the memory. Poland is the country that, to a large extent, of course, in the past years it has improved, but was responsible, for instance, for upkeeping of the sites of the former death camps. It was, until a certain point, it was only financed by the Polish government. And Poland, even though did not play a central role in Holocaust, because it's not Nazi Germany, and it's Jews who mostly died there, somehow Poland is the center of it all. So again, it's another complicated aspect, and that only means, again and again, it's sort of becoming a cliche and boring, but that we have to meet together and work on those issues together, because it does regard Jewish communities who are outside of Poland. And generally, of course, that's going to be another cliche. Holocaust is a subject that belongs to our civilization and that should be learned by everyone and remembered by everyone. And anti-Semitism is also not just a problem of the Jewish community, but of a larger society. So I think there are many, many reasons why everyone from outside of Poland should be interested in this matter.
I just wanted to connect it a bit, the whole discussion to the Russian-speaking country representatives. I don't mean Russian speakers in other countries, but Ukraine, Russia. Take care. The issue is not disconnected from you. As far as I can see, right now, the anti-Semitic issue in Ukraine is live and kicking, and if it erupted a little bit less than this event in Poland, you have to be expecting it. I want to remind all of you, Russia representatives, that when the Russian-Ukrainian war started, there was an incredible eruption of anti-Semitic tones in the Russian public media and public space. The issue is not a Polish issue. It can pop up in any, I would, like 2 years ago, I would say in any European country. Now I would include United States too.
And I have one final question that's sort of tangentially related, which is about, as we were saying, oh, bless you. The Polish, the slaughter legislation that, where is it holding now, by the way?
Okay, so there is, because